When it comes to NFL content here on YouTube, draft grades are far from a unique concept, right? I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here with this series. We pretty much know what it's going to be. But that being said, typically when you see these videos, you get one of four flavors. You'll get somebody who will just talk about the things they liked about the draft, talk about their favorite draft classes. Maybe they'll throw in their least favorite draft classes, but they won't cover the draft in its entirety. Or you'll have somebody who will go division by division, make 8 videos talking about every single NFL division and what those teams in those different divisions did during the draft. You might have somebody who focuses on one specific team. Maybe they have a channel dedicated to that team and they only talk about the picks that that team made. Or you might have somebody who just throws it all in one video, talks for an hour, hour and a half, and that's how they cover the draft in its entirety. And all of that is fine and dandy. No hate to anyone who takes that approach with this content. But for me personally, I kind of hate myself. And also, I'm really disappointed in the pre-draft content I made. I didn't make nearly as much as I wanted to. So to kind of punish myself and also to try to stand out a little bit, we are going to be talking about all 32 teams in depth in 32 different videos. The original plan was to do that throughout the month of May. Obviously, we're in June now. I missed that deadline. So hopefully we'll be able to get it done by June. And if I can't get it done by the end of June, then we'll make another little intro video and I'll talk about how we're going to do it through May, June, and July. We'll just have to see how our schedule shakes out. So before we jump into it, I would like to give a quick disclaimer because this is the #1 type of comment I get on these videos. I would like to point out, I don't think I'm better than any NFL GMs out there. I am an amateur. I am somebody who has a little bit of free time and spends that free time studying the game and scouting college players. I'm not a professional. If you think your favorite GM knows more about football than I do, you're probably right and I won't fault you for that. I'm not trying to say that I know more than any of these GMs I'm critiquing. I'm simply providing analysis based off of my analysis of different draft prospects and also talking about maybe what I would have done differently if I was in their shoes. It's a fun exercise. It's a great way to talk about some guys that I probably wouldn't have talked about otherwise. And if you think this is me trying to say I'm better than X GM, you are absolutely wrong. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Buffalo Bills and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. The Bills are in a pretty weird spot right now because they're still in line, to have their Super Bowl window be open. You look at their division right now, the AFC East is in a really weird spot because you have the Jets that probably on paper should be favorited, but their quarterback is 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming off a major injury, and he's also modern day Aaron Rodgers, so there's always going to be something going on there. You have the Patriots who just aren't anywhere near contending yet. They just drafted their quarterback. We got to see how that's going to play out with the new regime. And then you have the Dolphins who, maybe pose the biggest threat to Buffalo, but we've seen, they perform really well against bad teams and then kind of fall apart against the good ones. So we'll have to see what they're looking like this year. So on paper, this division's wide open, meaning Buffalo can get themselves into the playoffs. And then once you get into the playoffs, Josh Allen is Josh Allen, right? However, getting there isn't as easy as, kind of stacking yourself up against the division because you have to consider what's going on in-house. And Buffalo's roster is going through this change where, you're losing a lot of pieces, whether it be to free agency with your 2 safeties, Hyde and Poyer both left, whether it be with Stephon Diggs getting traded, which realistically, that was probably addition by subtraction, but talent-wise, Diggs is still pretty freaking good. You have Von Miller, who's getting a bunch of money and isn't on the field, and when he is, he's just not Von Miller anymore. And then you have to start to consider the future because guys like Matt Milano aren't getting any younger. You just lost Trey White as well, so you have a bit of a hole at corner, even though, again, Trey White hasn't really been Trey White. But the point is, you had this beautiful roster constructed that really seemed like it was primed to win it all at some point. And now that's kind of falling apart and your roster is going through this metamorphosis. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just kind of how this sport in this league works. But it puts Buffalo in an interesting spot. Because realistically speaking, they were one huge offseason overhaul away from being the favorites in their division and making a bit of noise in the playoffs. And the draft's a big part of that. And with the draft class they had, I feel like they're still in that same spot. I don't think this is a draft class that says, oh, hell yeah, they're ready. It's more of a, okay, they added some really intriguing pieces. We'll have to see how it plays out, right? And that, of course, starts with Keon Coleman, the wide receiver out of Florida State. their first pick, who they traded down twice to grab the rare double trade down. And Coleman's a really interesting player because he adds something this wide receiver room does not have. You look at what you have right now, Khalil Shakir, stereotypical slot, right? Makes some really big plays, only getting better. Curtis Samuel, also probably more of a slot receiver, but can play like the Z role and be a good short to intermediate threat. Guy like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, pure deep threat. Gives you some speed, can stretch the field. He's somebody you are familiar with Mahomes throwing the ball up to. Josh can do a lot of the same. You have Mac Hollins, who, God love him, UNC alumni. He's not a wide receiver you want to see carry a lot of the load, but he does, he's a solid route runner. He's a good deep threat, not a field stretcher, but can make plays downfield. Then you have some other interesting names, guys like KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella, Chase Claypool, Justin Shorter. Some athletes who just kind of are a whole lot of nothing as of right now. Maybe you think you can make them into something. But the big thing this room is missing is a true dominant X receiver. Like that stereotypical number one 50-50 ball type of guy. Think an AJ Brown, think a T Higgins, think a little further back, a guy like Calvin Johnson, that type of player. Obviously plenty more examples, but football brain, those are the only three that are coming to mind for some reason. Point I'm trying to make is, I think Keon Coleman is that for you. He's got the build, 6'3", 213 pounds. He's a pretty good accelerator, great lateral twitch for his size. He's a much smoother athlete than you'd expect given how poorly he tested and also his sheer size at 6'3", 213 pounds. He's got flexible hips, which allow him to pinch tight angles, as a route runner. Secure hands, had a 4% career drop rate on 184 targets. He's a better separator and overall route runner than his testing numbers would indicate, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Credible at the catch point, and this is the big thing, with timing, coordination, strength, and body control that gives you like contortionist vibes. Put incredible ball-winning tape on display during his sophomore year at Michigan State specifically. He's pretty fluid after the catch, easily could have been utilized more in the short to intermediate game during college, which is something I expect Buffalo to explore a little bit more with him. He absorbs contact after the catch and can quickly reset his feet after taking a hit, allowing him to stay upright. He's an elite run blocker with patience and tenacity at the contact point. And also, you got to remember to go with the 50-50 ball stuff. He was a basketball player, not just on any program, not just a part of any program. He was with Michigan State, which is one of the more respectable basketball programs out there. So, it wasn't like he just made it on at some bum school. He was on the Michigan State roster. Now, when we look at weaknesses, the two big gripes. College production, which I'll tell you outright, I don't care about. College production, sure, you can use it, but like at the end of the day, when you're drafting a player, you're not drafting him because he was productive. You're drafting him based on traits. You're drafting him based on intangibles. How big are they? How fast are they? How good of a route runner are they? How polished are they? How much potential do I see in this player? And Keon Coleman, while, yeah, he never surpassed 800 yards, I think it was. Yeah, 800 yards. He never had more than 800 yards. He showed you all the potential, all the upside, all the flashes of what you want. It's a matter of drafting him and thinking you can develop him. I think Keon Coleman is a lot further in his development than those numbers would indicate. You also have to consider outside factors. Jordan Travis was a little bit overrated as a college quarterback. Michigan State, I don't even know who their quarterback was when he was playing there, but I can tell you right now from watching the tape, he wasn't very good. So, a lot of things go into that. Then the other big thing is the separation, right? People look at his testing numbers. They're like, oh, this guy's slow. He's not going to be able to beat press. He's not going to be able to do this. He's not going to be able to do that. First of all, his testing numbers do not do his tape justice. Tape above all else when it comes to evaluating college prospects, and he is much quicker, much faster, much better at separating downfield on tape than those testing numbers would suggest. And even if they aren't, might I remind you of one of the better X receivers of the 2010s, who also wasn't the best separator, but found ways to win with route running and size and physicality, and Brandon Marshall, who is my comp for Keon Coleman. I see a lot of Brandon Marshall in his game. I am a Bears fan, if you weren't already aware. I know Brandon Marshall pretty much inside and out as a ball player, and I see a lot of Keon Coleman in that, or a lot of him in Keon Coleman, excuse me. So I think this is a great pick. I think you get Josh like a true number one, something he needed, obviously, with Stephon Diggs leaving. Gives you a different type of ball player. I think he's somebody that you're going to be able to get production out of at all three levels. I'm really excited to see how he's going to work out in Buffalo. So I thought that was a great pick. And then a little bit later in the second round, the 60th overall pick, they take Cole Bishop, the safety out of Utah. And I also really like this pick, but it's one I had to sell myself on because I can't just shake the fact that the Bills passed up on Malik Mustafa. These two guys, I think, play very similarly. And I think Mustafa's a lot better. I think he's more athletic. I think he's more physical. Not as big, but he's better in coverage. I like Mustafa a lot. However, realistically, this was not a great safety class. And unless this was like taking, Jaden Hicks or Sion Vaki or, someone like Katano Ladapo or whatever over Mustafa, I can't give this a horrible grade. I think Bishop is good for what the Bills want. And that's somebody that's going to be able to play, a lot of cover two, a lot of quarters, be able to come up and play across the line of scrimmage, or play up on the line of scrimmage, rather, not across. You're not lining him up at D-end, 3-tech, or nose tackle. I mean, around the line of scrimmage, as a box safety. And Bishop can do all of that. He's got a good frame, 6'2", 206 pounds, good length with almost 30-inch arms, good to solid stop-start burst in coverage and in pursuit, good route anticipation, good lateral burst. He looks to really just pop receivers as much as humanly possible. In zone, he is an absolute pest. His motor never stops running, just always going at it 150%. It doesn't matter if he's right at the ball or all the way across the field. He's going to work his ass off to get back to the ball. He navigates traffic really well. He's able to slide himself into tight spaces as a run defender, slip into the backfield. So he's going to make plays for you at, the second and third level pretty consistently. Now, there are going to be times where he's going to get, a little antsy and kind of headhunt and leave a zone to go try to hit somebody. He needs to do a better job of shedding blocks, which he's got the size to do it. I think it's more of a technique thing personally. There are going to be times where, he kind of lacks control, when in pursuit. And again, that's just kind of a, hey, listen, Cole, buddy, we get you want to kill somebody. We love that. Dial it back just 5%. In order to kill the guy, you got to get to him first. So we gotta pull this back in. So I like the Bishop pick, even if I didn't love it at first. I understand it from Buffalo's perspective. I've seen some people compare him to Micah Hyde. I don't think that's entirely off base. I can see that, and that would only make this make more sense. Personally, I saw a lot of Talanoa Hufanga in Bishop's game, and that's a good thing. I love Talanoa Hufanga. He's one of my favorite safeties in the league. Just another hard-hitting box safety that can play over the top if you need him to. I would say Bishop's probably a little bit better at playing over the top than Hufanga was coming out, so that's a bonus to his game. But I like the pick. I think it's a good pick. Even if I would have rather have seen them take Malik Mustafa, I can at least see the vision enough to be like, okay, I can't knock you for that, other than not saying this is an A+ home run pick. But then you get into the third round, and they take Dwayne Carter, the D-tackle out of Duke, and this is one I don't see the vision at all. You're in the third round. You're still trying to find a starter. I don't see a world where Dwayne Carter's a starter at any point in his career, just because he's not somebody you can play on all three downs. He's a designated pass rusher at D-tackle. He's got the good athletic profile. He's quick. He's got active feet. He's got good twitch. He's going to be a gap shooter. He's pretty good at moving vertically. He's got long arms. He can convert speed into power. He was pretty productive in 2022. Has a good spin move. And that's kind of the thing. Another thing with Carter is I'm somebody who puts a lot more weight into their most recent tape than, prior years, unless there's some extraneous circumstance, right? If it came out that Carter was playing with a broken foot the whole season, then, I'll sing a different tune. Or if I found out Carter was dealing with some sort of family tragedy and his mind just wasn't in, a different story. But from what I know, and if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below, and I will happily, take fault for that. But to my knowledge, Carter just wasn't as good in 2023, and that matters a lot. The most recent tape you put on, to me, is the closest to what you're going to be at the next level. And if you're I don't want to say regressing, but if you're not improving from your second to last year to your last year in college, then that's a red flag. Looking at some of his weaknesses, he's relatively athletic. He's not some insane athlete. He's not Jalen Carter. He's not, a super athlete for the position. Misses an absurd amount of tackles in the backfield because when he's shooting gaps, he's not paying attention to where he's shooting. He's just trying to get back there and figure everything else out later. That's a recipe for disaster. He has a lighter frame and doesn't have a lot of play strength, which is going to hurt him against the run. If he's not shooting gaps, he is going to get uprooted and moved around. He lunges pretty often, which is also going to cause him to miss tackles. Ball carriers are able to slip right by him pretty often. He doesn't have a whole lot of eye or gap discipline, which is an issue, obviously. His pad level is pretty inconsistent. And outside of that spin move I already mentioned, doesn't have much of a pass rushing plan. So you look at Buffalo's defensive line. First of all, this has been one of their bigger issues as a team, is their interior defensive line, because they haven't had that true, space eater. They haven't had that true good nose tackle, and when they have, it's just so happened that he's always managed to get hurt. So what do you do instead of that? You draft worse Ed Oliver, who you're already paying a ton of money to in the third round, when you could have taken a space eater at defensive tackle. I mean, if you're looking at this graphic on your screen, you can see I had 15 D tackles above Dwayne Carter. Guys including that went after him, guys like McKinley Jackson, Tyler Davis, Christian Boyd, guys that, sure, maybe they weren't as good, or maybe you wouldn't have taken them this early, but they would have served this role a little bit better. I don't see the vision. I don't get it. Christian Boyd I would have taken over Dwayne Carter, now that I say that. But it's tough. Like, if I really, really wish they would have taken McKinley Jackson here. It would have been such a big win for them to have that true space eater. Same thing with Christian Boyd, who is not only a space eater, but has a little bit of pass rushing chops. Like, the more I think about it, the more I start to hate it. I can't hate it too much because I get wanting to have depth for Ed Oliver, but taking depth in the third round when you still have holes to fill is an issue. Especially taking depth at a position where you're known to have injuries at that position, and it's not with the guy that you're getting a backup to. Because, spoiler alert, neither one of Dwayne Carter or Ed Oliver is playing nose tackle for you. Ever. And if they do, good luck. But moving off of that, getting a little more positive, their next pick was running back Ray Davis out of the University of Kentucky. And I like this pick. Don't love it, solely because I thought there were some better backs on the board. You look at some guys like Braylon Allen, who would play a very similar role to Ray Davis, Audric Estime, who again can play a very similar role. Those two in particular, I thought were substantially better. Like, Braylon Allen was my RB1. So to take Davis over the two of them hurts this grade a little bit. But I do like what Davis brings to the table for Buffalo, because it's something different. They've really been missing their, Devin Singletary type of back. Because, yeah, James Cook is awesome, but he's not somebody you can trust to run reliably between the tackles in short yardage situations, just because he's not that big. He's also had some fumbling issues. Ty Johnson, love him to death. Kind of the same thing. You don't want him being your power back running between the tackles. Ray Davis, that is kind of all you're getting out of him. People talk about, how do I want to put this? He is like the definition of a scheme-friendly RB2. Think of Darrell Henderson, think of Mike Davis, think of Chuba Hubbard. A guy who, yeah, he's not going to win you games. He's not an elite back. He's probably not great at any one thing. But if he's your RB2, you're feeling pretty good about it. And that's what he is here in Buffalo. So looking at what he does well, he's got a good build. He's got good play strength, contact balance. He's able to kind of handle those between the tackles runs, like I was saying. He's got enough speed to break off a big run here and there. Don't expect it consistently, but it will happen from time to time. Has good vision, which is a big thing for me. Love his vision. He's a pretty smooth pass catcher with good field vision after the catch as well. Possesses the ability to track the ball and reel it in while making it look pretty effortless. 0 fumbles in college, knock on wood, which is a big deal, again, considering James Cook. And he's a pretty strong and willing pass blocker. Now, on the flip side of things, he's going to be a 25-year-old rookie. Doesn't have a lot of athletic traits. His short area burst and quickness are adequate, I would say. Not good, not great, not bad, pretty adequate. And when he's lowering his shoulder to try to run through contact, he is going to stop his feet from time to time, which is a bit of an issue. So if you can coach him up and make him your Devin Singletary, then this can be a really nice pick. Again, if it wasn't for Braylon Allen and Audric Estime in particular still being on the board, I would have this pick a lot higher. But as well as Kamani Vidal, those three all still being on the board, making this pick, I don't love, but I get it. I think Ray Davis is fine enough, so we'll give it a B. Then we get into the 5th round. They made 3 picks, the first of which is Cedric Van Pran, the center out of Georgia. And holy cow, how did he fall this far? I cannot believe he was available here in the 5th. This is an absolute steal for Buffalo. You know, I had a 2nd round grade on him. Falls to the 5th here. He was my, 3rd rated center behind Jackson Powers Johnson and Graham Barton. Just awesome. Just absolutely awesome. You're looking at a guy who has the experience, 3 years of high caliber reps under his belt. He has really good hands, really good athletic traits, very twitchy, real good grip strength, good anchor. He has above average run blocking instincts, and he is pretty good at getting to the 2nd level and taking linebackers out of run plays, As a pass blocker, he's got the instincts. He's able to pick up on blitzes pretty well. Like, he's got a lot of what you want as a center, right? Now, there are going to be issues with his balance from time to time, mainly because he doesn't bend his knees as much as you'd like to see, which, coaching, you can work with him on that. He also doesn't have great length, so there's going to be times where guys are going to get in his chest, and that will be a problem. But if you're going to have one position on your line where you can afford to have someone with shorter arms, it is center, just because center, a lot of the time, you don't have them blocking one up. Usually they're double teaming somebody, or they have some sort of assistance, or they're just getting to the 2nd level and hitting a linebacker, and that's not going to be an issue when he's taking care of linebackers. So I like the Van Pran pick. I thought he was worth a pick way higher in the draft than in the 5th round. So this is a steal. This is a need. You look at what they had at center. Connor McGovern is okay, I guess. But after losing Ryan Bates and losing the other center that you had that I can't remember the name of, you ended up having to cut because of injury. You needed a center. And I think Cedric Van Pran paired with Osiris Torrance and probably David Edwards, maybe Connor McGovern slips out to guard. I think that's a pretty solid interior line. I love Osiris Torrance. He was one of my favorite players in the draft last year. So back-to-back years where I think you're getting a true building block that's going to help you a lot more in the run game and the pass game than in the pass game, but can definitely contribute in the pass game as well. So definitely something Buffalo needed. And then their next pick, they end up taking the linebacker out of UW, Edifwan Ulofoshio, I believe is how you say his name. I probably butchered that, and I do apologize. But all you need to know, high upside, developmental, athletic linebacker. I had a 5th round grade on him. You get him in the 5th round. Definitely can't complain there. He's got the size. He's got the length. Looking at a guy that's 6 foot, 236 pounds, 32-inch arms. Really tough. Great athletic profile. Good burst in the short areas of the field. He's able to stop ball carriers in their tracks between the tackles. Good enough tackler in open space. He's bendy, he's explosive, he's a good blitzer. He can beat blockers around the edge with speed. He's pretty good at covering tight ends and running backs and man coverage. He can quickly close gaps in zone coverage with his athletic profile. And right away, you'll be able to plug him in as a pretty good special teams player as well. Now, on the flip side of things, he only started 1 year in college. Not great at getting off blocks yet. His run diagnostics need some work, but they are improving. You saw some steady improvement throughout the season. There's going to be some issues with over pursuing gaps, which ties back into those run diagnostics. Same thing with his gap discipline. It just isn't there yet. And in coverage, he doesn't have natural instincts, but he's definitely somebody you can put in a zone or put in man and say, hey, take care of this spot on the field or make sure that guy doesn't get the ball. And he's going to do a good enough job at it. But where this excites me is you look at Matt Milano, who, fact of the matter is, he's just starting to get up there in age, or really is already up there in age, 29 years old. You got to start considering the future. And I think Ulofoshio can be a fantastic developmental player behind Milano. If you can get him to learn some of the more football aspects of football, right? He's got all the athletic stuff down. You can get him to learn some of the more football aspects of football from Milano and some of the other vets on this team. Like you have Nick Morrow, who's bounced around a little bit. Terrell Bernard's got a few years under his belt. You got a good defensive staff. If you can work with him in that regard, then I think you can have yourself a very nice linebacker core with him and Bernard, who's still relatively young. Dorian Williams, who came out of Tulane last year, I was a big fan of. I still think is going to be pretty awesome, just needs a little bit of time to grow as well. You have the makings of what can be a really nice linebacker core long-term. So I like this pick a decent bit. But yeah, no complaints there. There were linebackers on the board that I liked a little bit more, like Jalen Ford or Michael Barrett. But I get wanting to go this route because Ulofoshio is a way better athlete than those two. He's more of a developmental player, and that's what you're going for here. You're not looking for somebody that's going to start day one at linebacker because you have your day one starters. You're just looking for the athletic upside there. And then with their final pick in the 5th round, only 8 picks later, they take Javon Solomon, the edge out of Troy. And this is a fun pick. This is, I was talking about earlier, Dwayne Carter being a designated pass rusher. This is another example of that type of player. However, instead of taking him in the 3rd round, when there's still guys on the board that can play all 4 downs for you at the position, you're taking him in the 5th round as a developmental player that's going to maybe play 1 to 2 downs per drive, or 1 to 2 downs per set of downs, right? A designated pass rusher, bring him in on obvious passing downs, that type of thing. This is where you take that type of player. I tried to stress this in the Dolphins video because the Dolphins took Chop Robinson in the 1st round. I thought that was a terrible pick. This is where you take a guy like that. Not on day 1, not on day 2, here on day 3. That's where you take these role players because you're just trying to find somebody that you're going to get value out of. And this is a good pick for that. Look at Solomon, his powerful hips, really good effort as a guy that can get that 2nd, 3rd, 4th effort sack in there. He's quick to read and beat reach blocks and while maintaining his positioning. He is really in tune with his hand usage, has a pretty solid bag. He shows the ability to bend the edge and kind of get back there to get to the quarterback. He's really good with his counter moves. Now, he's not the biggest guy in the world. Size and length and, strength just aren't his strong suits. But again, designated pass rusher, that's kind of what you're expecting. So just as a DPR here, because again, you look at this edge room, you have Greg Rousseau, who I'm a big fan of. You have AJ Epinesa, who is very, very solid. Both of those guys are a little bit more reliant on power as rushers. Von Miller is what he is at this point, but he can be one hell of a teacher for Solomon, teach him the ways. Like I said, Solomon's got the bend, he's got the hand usage. It's just a matter of winning maybe a little bit more consistently and kind of tapping into that power profile. And I think Von Miller can definitely help him do that. And if not, he can teach him how to get away with, not having a whole lot of a power profile. Not saying Von Miller didn't, but if anyone would know how to kind of win without using power, it would be Von Miller. So I definitely think that's a good pick there. Again, I like the idea of going with a rotational player in the 5th round a hell of a lot more than I do in the 3rd round. But then in the 6th round and also in the 7th round, they make 3 picks that I'm going to be honest, I'm not super familiar with. I did watch a little bit of Tylen Grable, the tackle out of UCF, when I was watching some other players like Javon Baker and, developmental tackle prospect by all means. Fun story here. He was a quarterback in high school, threw for 3,000 yards his junior year in high school. Now he's an offensive tackle in the NFL. Pretty crazy development there. He's got strong hands. His pass protection is solid. Needs a little bit of improvement, but I definitely think the potential's there for him. His hand strikes and placement need some development. Specifically, again, just a solid developmental offensive tackle here. Definitely can't hate that here in the 6th round. Buffalo needs that offensive line help. We'll have to see what he's able to do. So I like the pick. Fun story. solid enough developmental option. I know I keep saying developmental, but that's really been the theme here towards the end of the draft for Buffalo. But these last two picks, Daquan Hardy and Travis Clayton, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I didn't watch either of them. I'm not familiar with their games. So I'm not giving them a grade for that reason. You know, I'm not going to grade somebody if I didn't watch them. I could grade off process, but I haven't done that for anybody else, so I'm not going to change my mind here. Just know that these won't negatively or positively impact the final grade when I give it out. But the process of taking a corner in the 6th round that maybe is a special teamer, maybe makes your roster, sure, go for it, right? Buffalo secondary could definitely use the depth. You've got some good pieces up top with Rasul Douglas, Teron Johnson, but you need that depth. So we'll see if Daquan Hardy can be that. If not, we'll see if he can't be a decent enough special teamer. Again, not super familiar with his game, so if I'm missing something grand here, please let me know. And then Travis Clayton, the offensive tackle out of England. Very interesting stuff here, you know, international pathway player, going the Eagles route of taking a flyer on a big athletic dude who hasn't played the most football, you know, kind of like they did with Jordan Mailata. Maybe this works out in the same way for Buffalo. You know, if that's the case, more power to them, right? They're able to find a hidden gem here in the 7th round that can be a Pro Bowl caliber tackle, much like Mailata is, then fantastic. If not, it's a 221st pick in the draft. Nobody's going to blame you for taking that swing, so can't really say much more about that. But as a whole, I'm pretty okay with what Buffalo did here, all things considered. I'm going to give them a B+. I definitely think this was an above average draft class. You know, Coleman and Bishop and Davis, even though I wish they would have went with a different back, are going to be good day one contributors. Van Pran might start day one. If he doesn't, then just know long-term you've got your center. Edifwan and Solomon and Grable, good developmental options at their respective positions. Hardy, maybe I'm missing something there. I genuinely just don't know. Clayton, fun international pathway player. And of course, Dwayne Carter. Can't say I love the pick, but he is a player that does very specific things. So maybe he'll do those specific things better than I think he will. But all that said, you know, I think they did a pretty good job. Buffalo definitely has a path to win their division this year. Will that happen? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But this draft definitely pushes them in that direction.
Had a chance on the throwback. This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Coleman. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that